The door was still swinging when my dad came home and said that we needed to get out of the city at night. No, he did not ask if I was ready. He spoke as one who knows that if you justify, you won't be able to get away. The tone of his voice, it caused me to freeze on the inside, because I know that sound since I was a child. This is the sound when there is no turning back. He sat down at the table and began to talk as if he were reading it in a sentence. He said that his name was printed, which is a dangerous person they knew, too, that the city had turned into a trap. When you mention him, I could feel the shock cross my body. Robert, the man I love. My dad said that he wasn't who I thought he was, which is to stay. It meant that I put myself in the path of destruction. I wanted to respond, to defend or deny it all. But I stayed still. Because no matter what Does admit, it's something that's inside of me. I was already suspicious. He had a lot of time. He said the money is hidden, root out of the map. Document to be false. Every word he increased the weight on my chest. As a result, my mind insisted on returning to her eyes to his, and for the promises you have made, in a low voice, to the sense of security that I believed in and feel right next to him. My father didn't give me any comfort. She just said that I was up to in the morning to make a decision. Before you get out of the room, he left a sentence. That is the most hurt. If I stay, would it be a daughter to him? That was not a threat. It was a finish line. I went over to the window and saw a car parked on the other side of the street. Your heart fluttered in a way that caused me to lose my breath away. It seemed as if the whole town was watching me. My cell phone rang again almost at the same time. A message from Robert. Enjoy it, straightforward, we need to talk. It is a serious matter. It was not a request, it was a warning. At that moment, I realized that I was no longer dealing only with one's feelings. It was survival. When I met Robert, the tension was obvious. He didn't touch me. I tried to calm him down. He spoke to my father with a coldness that I had never seen before. He said that there was evidence that the investigation was at an advanced, that a man had to pay for what he had done. I asked him if he spoke of it as the sheriff or the person that you used to say, I love you. He didn't answer from the look. He quietly opened up a gaping hole inside of me. It was then that he told the truth, that all changed. The investigation has never been just about my dad. I was also part of the plan, not as a lover, but as a bait. My body reacted before my mind. Her legs gave out, and the air was missed. The man in whom I trusted and was willing to use me to close the case. He said it was to protect me in the end. Everything would be fine after that. But there's no protection when the trust has already been broken. I went back to the house without getting on the floor. My dad was sitting in the dark waiting in the wings. Said nothing, just put it in a folder on the table. The one that was in there ended any illusion that there was still. Photos, audio recordings, and names that point. I had never heard of the connectors that would be much beyond the little town. Robert wasn't just him. There was something more behind it. Something that's old and well organized and hidden away under the guise of law and order. My father, he was not evading justice. I was running away from something that does not forgive those who know too much. The time ran out too soon. The bags were ready to go. The road was expected. And on the other hand, is a man armed, desperate, demanding that I have to choose a side. At that point, I knew that any decision would mean missing out on someone else. Maybe more than one. My heart has not followed the logic, and logic doesn't exit cleanly. I had only one thing is certain. The choice of what I would have done that night going to change everything. And then there was the truths that I wasn't ready to face it. At that time, first of all, exit completely out of control. And I had to stop for a second and take a deep breath, because stories like this are not just my own. Maybe you've never been forced to choose between her father and the person you love. But you've definitely felt that tightness in your chest when you realized that whatever that decision was going to hurt. If this has happened to you in any way, just leave it in the comments. No need to explain too much. Sometimes, it is only to say, I understand. I already create a bow for silent among those who are on the other side of the screen, and the ones who are on here telling all of it. And if so, up to now. This is a story I already pinned it. If it's something you become restless, you enjoy the video. As a gesture, an automatic. But as a token of that type, and for him needs to continue to exist. Each of the enjoy will help to bring this story as more far away to other people who may be living with conflict like that in a different context. It's just that all of this is gaining strength. If you feel that you want to keep up with what's next, if you want to keep with me until the end of the night that changed everything, and subscribe to the channel right now. It's not just about the numbers. It's about making a space for stories and more intense, making the impossible and uncomfortable truths to be shared and filtered. When you sign up, you say that you want to listen until the very end, and that he is willing to take what comes along with it. Because from here, it is not easy. That is what I did then has put everyone at risk, including me. And that's just where the story starts to get even more mind-blowing. My dad was sitting at the table as if she had already gone through the worst, and I was still trying to figure out at what point in my life I had become a minefield. He was saying, but every word seemed to be so strong, as if it had been rehearsed 4 days at a time at the head of it. He said that everything had gone wrong, that is, the name of which was marked that it wasn't just fear, it's sure to. I wasn't used to seeing my father sure to be one of the bad things. It has always been the kind of guy who sees the storm from the front. It solves. It gives you a way out. That night, he wasn't solving anything, he was going back. And that, in itself, was quite a revelation. I tried to ask the question, is marked by who? But he raised his hand, calling for silence, as if to ask the question was a dangerous one. It was as if the walls had ears. As if the entire city had come to our house, I didn't realize it, waiting for the moment to fasten the trap. He repeated that the us needed to come out before the dawn of the morning, because then it would be too late. And when someone says, too late in that way, you are not talking to miss the bus. He is talking to miss out on the chance to keep breathing and not looking over my shoulder. It was only then that he spoke to them in the name of Robert, and I swear I felt my body reacting before thinking. With a shock, in short, is a tightness in her chest, as if someone had placed a hand on the inside of me and closed the handle. Robert was the man I loved, the man that I stood up in silence, the man who, in a normal day, you could appear to me to feel that everything was going to be all right. My dad said that he was not who he seemed to be, did not speak as someone who is suspected, spoken like someone who knows how. And that's changing the mindset in a way that I didn't expect that, because all of a sudden, I was struggling on whether I believed in Robert. And I was being forced to face up to the possibility that I would never have had all of the pieces of the puzzle together. My father went on, and his voice was firm when she said that Robert was going to destroy me. Not can't, not maybe. I was going. The word on the board as a sentence. I feel anger rise. The need is almost automatic. To protect the people I love. I wanted to scream out that he was overreacting, that I haven't felt that Robert has saved me more than once, that he was looking at me like who? Like who wouldn't be able to harm him? But I didn't nod in at the time. Because, as my father spoke, I was reminded of the little things that I have been pushing you down onto the carpet, as if ignoring it is the same as deleting. The way that Robert, at times a change in the tone, when it was my father's, the way that he was asking too many questions with a quiet, as if you were drawing a map on the inside of my head, on the way, as he always was in the right place at the right time, as if to join him on a route that I hadn't seen before. And especially, that of the strange feeling that I've been trying to call it jealousy, or of concern, but looking at it now, it seemed to control it. Behind the scenes, a true hidden that I didn't want to see it because you see it, it meant admitting that I'd allowed ourselves to be led. My dad said that to stay was to choose to curse. And when he said, the ruin, and I've seen the word, flip the images, in my mind. It's not in a dramatic way, but in real life I am alone, with no ground, no support, no one. I could see my life turning into a before and an after. I could see my transformation is going on in the worst way. It was not by growth, but by the loss. And yet, I wanted to stress that he was in the wrong. Because you accept what he said he meant to look to one thing. That it is so scary in any journey is a personal one. The idea that we can love someone that don't love us the same way again. Or even worse, that he loves in a way that is hurtful. I tried to get up from a chair, but my legs did not obey. It was really scary at the same time. I've always felt I was strong. I was stuck there, as if the air had become thicker. My father watched as my face, and he seemed to understand the war going on inside of me, only that he did not try to relieve it. It didn't come with a hug, with a "it'll be okay." He didn't have that luxury. He was in a hurry. And in the rush of it, I would say that the impact of what was happening, it was more than I could measure. It was at this point that I noticed a single thing, and it's terrible. He was trying to convince me with excitement. He was trying to save me with the facts. And then, when my father uses "it suits you," it is because of the excitement has already failed. I swallowed dry. And then, without even wanting to, I escaped. "What is this you have done?" The question came out as a whisper, but he carried it all. The guilt, the fear, the hope, the anger. It took a long time to respond. It took a lot of time. And in that silence, that was the first concrete evidence that there was something hidden. Something that he had been carrying out alone. Something that maybe I don't like to figure it out. He took a deep breath, as if he was choosing one of the most secure in the world, and then looked straight at me with a seriousness that I had never seen before. And there and then, with the clock ticking, and the name of Robert standing in between us as a threat. And I felt like I was about to hear the truth that it would change everything. Not just my father, but also about myself, my decisions, and about the type of person that I would have to make myself from that night. He looked at me for a while. It seemed like it was too long, as if he were trying to decide which was the more dangerous. I tell you the truth, the whole, or leave me in the dark. And I realized that, from behind him silently, there was a story that did not fit into a few lines of text, was behind the scenes. I had something that was buried. My father took a deep breath and began to speak in a whole new way, with no drama, but with the seriousness that it changes the mood of the entire room. He talked about the roads that do not show up on the GPS points of the meeting that are only for those who already have to disappear, and on the money held in trust, where no one would look for, and the false documents, as if his life has already been unmounted and mounted again, time and time again. And I was listening, but my mind did, not for a lack of respect. It was an instinct, because as long as he's described it, I could only see her eyes to his. The way he was looking at me when he said that it was going to be all right. The tone of his voice low, almost intimate, as if the outside world could not catch up. I clung to those memories, like the one who tries to grasp hold of a glass frame with both hands. And the worst part is that I have loved Robert in a way that I couldn't explain it right. It was not the love of the movie, those who come for music, the beautiful, and the promises of perfection. It was a love to dangerous, the kind that can change the mindset of the people without asking permission, which is of the us to defend the indefensible, which we call the mind of what, in essence, already turning around to control it. I wanted to believe my father. I was exaggerating. I wanted to believe that he was scared, and because of this, I was turning to Robert in a game. It's just that, while at the same time, I was the one hooked to the intuition that we try to ignore it, but she insisted. The small discrepancies that I had pushed it inside of me. Moments in time that Robert seemed to know too much. That it would be too soon. He had questions that go along with love, and I've always found a way to justify it. It's his life's work. It does. He wants to protect you. It's just that. That night, those excuses have begun to sound like a lie. Again. My dad told me that we were up 2 in the morning. He said it as one who marks a limit to the end. I looked at the clock, and I felt angry for him. For me to put it up against the wall as I upload a decision that should not be mine. But then I looked at his face, and I realized he wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to save what still could be saved. And it gave me fear, because if a man like my father, he speaks of the salvation of souls, it is because you saw something too ugly to go on pretending to normalcy. I started to question everything in silence. Not only is my father and you Robert, but that's me. My whole day in the city. Those are my choices. The way I do me, I slid into a life that seemed to be safe, to figure out that the safety could be just such a scenario. The truth is hidden. It was not only my father is on the run, or the sheriff is after him. The truth is hidden. It was you and I, without realizing it. You may have turned on a piece in the game of someone else. And when you do that, the impact on physical health, it gives you a blank in the stomach. There is a warmth in the back of his neck, and a desire to go back in time. And if you look on the outside, my father spoke in a package that is buried, contact, waiting, a new route that had to be done without downtime. I interrupted him and said, almost without a voice, he was sure of that. He responded with a single sentence, "You cut off my air by half. I wouldn't be asking you this if I hadn't had it for sure." And then he said that Robert was not the only one. A man of evil or a man is confusing. He said that Robert was a part of something I don't understand it yet with a system. A gear change. The one thing that feeds off of people like us. And I saw that my father did not speak for the jealousy or pride. Said the fear is real. Only that you fear don't erase a feeling. I had a feeling too. I hated her for it at the moment. Why do I want to be rational? I wanted to practice. I wanted to be a daughter. Picks up a suitcase and he went away. But I was also a woman who loved a man. And that kind of love don't ask for permission in order to exist. It is simply there, and it doesn't take up space, even when it becomes a danger. I was trapped in the conflict, trying to keep her head in place as my heart was making the noise. It was then that my father got up, went into the hall, as if he needed to escape from my head to keep going. And then, without looking back, he let out a sentence that I'll never forget it. He told me I had to make a choice. But the way he spoke, there seemed to be a choice. It seemed like an amputation. You choose now. Until this morning, and when I tried to tell you that it was unfair to him, he cut me off with something worse. Something that sounded like a scam designed to hurt if I was you. I wouldn't be able to call him father. I felt his face burn up. Her throat closes. Because of that sentence, it wasn't just emotional blackmail. It was a line on the floor. He was telling me that if I were to choose Robert, I'm picking against the source, up against the one person who has always been there by my side before I even know what it was to love. I stood motionless, trying not to fall down in front of him. He came back into the room without waiting for an answer. Leaving the house is too big, and quiet too. And I was left there, alone on the table. The clock, and with that, a question, a nagging question. Should my father is willing to lose in order for me to save? What exactly? He looked at Robert, who I have yet to see, because at this point, I knew that it was a decision I was going to be taking it easy, not with the logic of perfection. I just did not know it, even before I was able to choose from a message that was going to come in and push everything to the limit. When I went to the window to search for air, but I did find something else. In the car, Robert was parked on the other side of the street. You stop too much to quiet. Too, as if he had turned a part of the landscape. It's just that I know that anything in there was the landscape. My heart raced so hard that I could feel the pulse in the tips of his fingers. The image of the car was not the only one. He's here. It was a warning, mute. And this is just a reminder that I was surrounded by a decision that you didn't expect me to get ready. For a second, I tried to convince myself that it was a coincidence. Robert could be out patrolling. He could have been doing the work for him. I was just passing by. But the truth is that, after a conversation with my dad, and my mentality is no longer able to swallow the words so easily, everything seemed to be loads of efforts behind the scenes. The move is calculated. And the more I looked at the car, I felt a strange thing. It wasn't just fear. It was that queasy feeling that someone else is looking back. And even if you don't see anyone else. I turned away from the window, trying to stay in control of your body. That was when the phone rang again. The screen lit up in the dark, and even before I could read. And my stomach had understood who he was. Robert. It was a short, dry and without affection, without words, that he used to use when I wanted to get tender on the inside. We need to talk. It is a serious matter. That's it. And yet, it seemed as if he had a hand in closing out of my chest. Really, that word has a different weight when it comes to someone who has you calm down. It does not say, "Let me see." She says, "Something is going to happen." It changes the air. And there, with my dad, speaking of the trail, and my love is on the other side of the street. I felt the impact of what had been the decision wasn't just emotional. It was not asked to choose who I love or who you created me. It was about survival. It's about the kind of truth is hidden. It will appear when the time is running out, and the skins will begin to slip. I was struck with the phone in his hand, staring at that sentence, as if he could pluck up the most sense to her. But it didn't, that was it. A command disguised as a conversation. I knew of Roberts enough to know that he is not writing in that way when I just want to talk. It was written that way when I was in control, when we set out on the way, when you expect me to just follow him. And it moved me in a way that is dangerous, because it is a part of me wanted to run up to him and ask him what was going on. I wanted to believe that he was going to explain it all to you. And that is, in the end, I was able to breathe again. Just another part, the part that my dad had woken inside of me and began to ask questions, which I tried not to. Because he was right there, just at the time. Why is this message, and just after my father's plot to the limit, to the break of dawn? What do you mean it's serious? Like if I didn't have the right to say no. I could feel my transformation happening in real time. With a change in its internal structure is almost cruel to someone you trust, someone who analyzes, someone who waits for somebody who hired them. And it hurts, because it's like losing a piece of the innocent in and of itself. I went back to the window and in more detail. The car was still there, no lights on, no visible movement, just the presence of it. And I thought about what my father had said to him on the walls of the ear, on the risk of the questions. All of a sudden, I found myself thinking about how the city seemed to be little predictable. Until I had to see you on the back of the joint. There may be a layer that you don't have imagined. Behind the scenes of a game in an old, quiet, and with the people that knows how to handle it. It felt kind of like being in the middle of the day. I don't believe. But now I am required to move fast, with no guide, no time to cry. I've looked into the hallway, to the door of the room of the father. He was in there, probably preparing to leak. How to prepare for a ritual. I was out there with a love that is calling out to me to give an interview as serious and a father's calling me to a life of dying out. I felt angry because it seems unfair to have to decide as well as the clock for me pressing. But at the same time, I knew that the world would not have the care of those who need in time, the world's thrusts. And that message was to be careful. I typed in where to, and then blacked out. I typed what is it, and then deleted as well. Why no response to my it would be a confession of fear, of doubt. It is a time of need. And I don't know what Robert did not have the right to know about me is that night. After listening to my father's house, not in that car over there. I took a deep breath, feeling her heart beating as if it wanted to get out to the gorge. And it was at that moment that I realized one simple thing. I did not like to keep the two worlds separated by time. A conversation with Robert was going to happen. And I want them to or not. And when that happened, I would have to go into it with your eyes open, even if it's destroying something that's inside of me. I do know that, while I tell you this, there is much to be banging around inside as well. So tell me in the comments, what would you do in my place at this moment? Will not go without looking at it backwards. You would find the conversation, even though I know that some truths that will change everything, sometimes. You write it will help you organize your own head. And you don't want to, because this story is also being built in this area of trading. I stood there with the phone in his hand, feeling the weight of the choice to grow up, knowing that the answer that I was sent to was going to open the door, which, perhaps, never more could it be closed. And while the car was still stopped on the other side of the street, I don't think that's the next step would be not only a conversation is difficult. It would be the beginning of something that is going to redefine who I am. And I just respond with what? It came out colder than I intended, and he sent me the address as if it was all decided. In AOA, close to the old road, away from the city, away from the gaze of curious. I walked out of the house without making a noise, as if the silence would protect me from anything. And then, as I walked, I could feel the transformation happening to me. It's a sort of fit procedure for the part you want to believe in love and has been giving way for a more alert, more able to communicate. As if my mind was learning how to survive, even before I understood the danger for the complete. The car was on the other side of the street, and when I did it, this was to me to relieve it. But he did the opposite. Because of the absence of also is moving. And on that night, every movement seemed to carry a message to be hidden. When I got there, Robert was already there, leaning against the car, arms folded on the tired face, the sunken eyes, as if he didn't sleep for a few days. I waited for a gesture automatic, with a touch on my arm. An hey you, a smile, a small, anything and everything that you say. I'm still me. But he didn't come to anything. He didn't touch me. Don smiled. No, I called it love. And in the absence of the simple things that struck me with the force of ridicule. Because sometimes, the more it scares you, it is not what he does. It is what it fails to do so. He started talking about my father's matter-of-factly, with no difference. He said that he was involved in something much bigger than I thought it would be. And I found out that I was prepared to hear it. But it wasn't, because the larger can mean a lot of things. You may be in debt. It may be a crime. It may be a mistake to the former. It's just that the way that Robert talked to was each other's weight, just as if he were describing a system with a gear concealed that swallows those who come too close. Behind the scenes of a play that I have never asked you to play the game. I said something was, and he let go of the word evidence as to whether she would handle it all proof. He said that he had enough evidence to end the life of my father. Not a research is not suspicious proof. And when someone says, well, the mindset changed in the time, because you realize that you're not in front of a man confused. Are you a person that has chosen a side? And it is only you, warning you not to get in the way. He told me that someone had to pay, and I came away with a sour taste in their mouth, because that didn't seem to justice. It seemed like the collection. It seemed to fit the bills. I looked up at him, trying to find the Robert I know. He was the man who used to tell me not to be afraid of. The man that made me believe that it has always existed as an exit clean. It's just that the one I saw in there was the other person. Someone who is a hardened, closed it, as if you carry a secret that is too big. Had dried up in any part of the soft on the inside. I have tried to keep the voice steady, but it came out shorter than I wanted it to. I asked him why he was telling me things like that, as if I was the only one in detail. He stared at it for a second, and then, for the first time, he seemed to hesitate. It was not true repentance. It was a calculation. As if he was weighing up how much I could take without losing control of the situation. The truth is, I've started to realize that I wasn't there to talk to. I was just there to be in place, to be put on the place that he was looking for. And it has given me anger. To an angry, hot rises quickly, because it hurt his dignity. I asked her where my dad was. He said that he did not know it, but in the shade it don't go with us. It was the tone of someone who knows too much, and you choose what to reveal. I took a deep breath and asked the question that I was insured from the table in the kitchen. And since the words are those of my father's ruin, and since the car is stopped on the other side of the street, I asked him if he was talking about how the sheriff, or the man who claimed to love me. I haven't spoken to the cause. I spoke because I needed an anchor, with a dash of truth in the midst of all of this. And for a moment, I thought he was going to look at me and say, like a couple, I thought he was going to try to smooth out, trying to pull me back to him. But he averted his gaze. It was a gesture, a small, almost nothing. And at the same time, it was as if he was being pushed to a wall in between us. That still didn't hurt more than any of the charges, because the silence is a receipt without a word. I felt the impact at the time. I was talking to him. The scent I had ever. The sheriff, to me, was the result. I heard myself asking him if he had any idea what she was asking for it. If it is, I understood that I was in the middle of that. I was not the object of the research, is that I have a life, a story, and a family. He responded with a statement that seemed to be trained. He said that he understood, but that the city was no longer a safe place for me. As for my father, he was released. And then he let out another thing in a low voice, as one who delivers the information to cut down on any resistance. He said that if my father could escape, I would go with. Like it or not, that sparked a warning for me, because there was no more over I choose to go with for my dad. It was about someone else decide that for me. It's about control. About the truth hidden, it will not appear and the gestures are pretty to look at. It only appears when someone finds that I have on hand. I felt a chill going up the spine, and for the first time, I asked myself, what do I call her? The love I had was, at some point, just for a stylish way to keep close to. And in that question, it's awful, because it changes the memory of it all. Rather, it changes the meaning of the conversations, the hugs, the church. It makes you revisit their own journey and see the cracks that were there from the beginning. It's just that you don't want to see. Robert kept talking, explaining that, to quote the names, times, places. But I wasn't listening to the same thing. I was just by looking at the details of his behavior, the way he avoided my eyes, when he was feeling, the way he's pressing in on him in the jaw, and when I mentioned my father's house. It was as if there was a part of him, sealed, a part of you that could not come out completely. Behind the scenes of the new one, a layer behind a layer. I asked him what kind of evidence he had. He told me that he could not show me all of it. He said that one word, with the quiet of those who have the power to choose, all the time. I felt an impulse to turn back, because when one begins to track down to the still, it's a sign that you've got on the highway, which did not return to it easily. It was only then that I realized something. I was there, no witness, out of the way, with one man, armed with the authority and in the dark, and I don't know what part of it is real. The sheriff, a lover, or some third thing that I saw. I swallow a dry, trying to keep his head, trying not to show fear. And even so, my voice shook when I said that my dad was asking me to run away with him that night. I wanted to see your reaction to his. I wanted to see the surprise, concern, and any and all mankind. What I saw was something else, a small twinkle in his eye, too fast, as if the information is fit to a piece that he had been holding on to. There is a lot of time. And in that moment, I understood that when I said, "Get away," I may have just given something he had been waiting to hear. When I told her that my father was asking me to run to the face of Robert, not to his surprise. And that was the first to hit the real one, because I was expecting something that looked like a human. Anger, fear, for me, very angry. But what it did was shine a fast look at it, as if I had confirmed it with a missing piece of a puzzle that he has used. There is a lot of time. He took a deep breath. He looked over to the side of the road as if it were asked to evaluate the place. And then it came back to me with a calm that did not fit with the size of what was going on. It was only then that I felt that the conversation has never been a full conversation. It was a beginning. Robert told me that I needed to listen to something without the need to stop. The tone of it is not asked for it and put in place. And then, for some reason, and I hate to say this, and I obeyed. Maybe it's because a part of me still wanted to believe that I was listening to until the very end. I will find an explanation to save something from me. He started out by saying that my father was not the only one, a man running away. He said that there was an investigation of the former, something which went through the towns. The names changed or deleted records. He spoke as one who describes the behind the scenes of a world I've never seen, and each and every sentence in it take a piece of the floor. I asked him why he was telling me that right now. He said to me, with the same composure, for the time is up. Then there was the shock of it all. It's dry, raw, no prep. He said that the investigation has never been just about my dad. And when I did mention to deny it. He raised his hand again, and repeating that I'm not supposed to stop. It was only then that he looked at me in a way I had never seen it. It was not affection. It wasn't a desire. It was not a concern. It was an assessment, as if I were going to a point on the map, a variable in a calculation. And then he said that I never imagined that I would be able to hear out of his mouth, and I was a part of the plan. My world came to a halt. I felt as if the air had gone away for a second and turned to heavy, hard to pull out. I waited for him to make something of it, Olivia's, any sentence that you had said. But that's not the way you're thinking. He completed it in the worst way possible. I said that I wasn't a suspect. He was not a criminal. And I was the bait. The word that went down between us like a bad taste, the bait. I repeated it in his mind, trying to figure out how anyone could say this to a person who claims to be in love. And that's where my mindset has really changed. Because up until this point, no matter how much I was scared, I still had hope for the children that it was all a misunderstanding with a desperate situation, which would be explained in a logical, carefully, and with some justice, to be clean. But bait, you don't have anything to clean. Bait is the strategy, operation. It is to accept that someone is going to hurt for another one to be captured. I felt anger and humiliation, and at the same time, angry he put me in this place. The humiliation that I had put away. Because I've got a review of my journey with Robert. As one of the finger in a wound, the sun is never closed it right. How many of the conversations were real? How many meetings by accident was planned? How many promises have been sincere? And how you were just a tool. I wanted to shout, but the voice did not come out. My body was trying to keep up with the flood. I have asked myself ever since. He hesitated, a hesitation to minimum, just enough to show that there is a truth hidden, the largest in there. Then he told me that in the beginning it was working. Just work. That he needed to get closer to understand the routine of my father and to map the movements and confirm that the roots. He spoke it as if it were natural, as if it was normal for someone in your life and the lives of the other person in the report. And then, in a voice that seemed to reach some of forgiveness, he said, "Things have changed." It was then that he told me that he fell in love with, and I'm almost laughs, the nervous system, because it sounded absurd. Passion does not go out of his method. Passion did not return in time. Passion does not undo the fact that I was used to. He noticed my gaze and tried to explain that he did it to protect me in the end. He said that when you ended up to be my father, and he would all but guarantee you that I would be well away from retaliation, far away from the display, as if I were a fragile object that he would keep it in a box and lock them up, since the mission was completed. I've heard of it, and I felt a pain that was so emotional. It was an almost physical pressure on his chest, as if I was holding back tears with her hands. Because it's the cruelty. It was not only a plan. It was the way that it was called that of the guard. Protection, according to him, it was for me to control. It was decide that for myself. It was to choose which of the truths that I deserved it. And the worst part is that I couldn't see it. Just for a second, the logic of him. He really believed he was doing the right thing. And that's scary, because we just don't see it as evil. You can see it as necessary. I asked him if he had no idea what he had done to me, what I had done to my confidence, the best of my ability to believe in someone. He didn't answer right away. Just let go of the air. And I said my name the way he used to say when he wanted to calm me down before. But now the sound seemed to be wrong, out of place, as a reminder to you that you don't fit into the present. From that point on, I began to understand it clearly. You choose. Robert meant to accept the fact that love can be so cruel. It's not because of love in and of itself is cruel, but because some people mix up love with the possession of it with a mission to power. I was looking for a man who has the power that I had never noticed the size. I took a step back without thinking, instinctively, as if my body had tried to pull away. Before that, to my mind, he would accept it. And he is also moved, it is not for me to touch you, but you block the road to make sure that I don't just turn your back and you were gone. It was a gesture, a small, almost imperceptible. And that was the confirmation that, even if he was still leading the game, The silence between us was thick and full of things left unsaid and in the revelations that were to come. I've always felt that if I were to stay one more minute in this place, that I might find out something even worse, something that would make it impossible to pretend that I knew who he was. And before I say anything else, he told me that he had a choice to me, with a choice of safe, he said. And when he used that word, I realized that the safety and security he had always came with a price that is hidden. I went back to the house. As anyone who carries a bomb in your chest and you have to pretend that you still know how to breathe. My hands were shaking, but I don't know if it was fear or anger, or just the shock of late, that I just had to listen to it. The door made a high to low when closed, and the silence there inside I hit a strange way, as if the house was holding up in the air next to me. My dad was sitting there in the dark, in the same way as before, motionless, waiting for him. "Don't ask me where I was," said the one I was telling you about. He just looked at me as if I already knew the size of the mess, and I froze. Before I could say anything, he pulled out a folder and threw it on the table. It was not an act dramatic. It was a sign of those who do not have any more time to smooth out anything. In the folder that was opened, and for a second, I didn't have the courage to touch. I was looking at it as if it might bite into. My father gave a signal to short the head, and then I approached him. When I saw the first few pictures, I have felt your stomach sink. No, these images have in common. Some were burned, others were registered in the fold. The dates scribbled, names crossed out with a pen, as if someone had tried to erase people from history. Faces of unknown people, cars on the roads are empty, and the buildings, it all seemed the same. And you still had to do something ominous about them. My father went down on one of the photos, and she said, in a whisper almost without sound, I needed to figure out one thing, and that Robert was not only the sheriff of the town, it never has been. The sign, it was just in the clean area. A part of you shows up, the rest of it was in the behind the scenes. He pulled out a recorder, a small and ancient, as if it were an event that has survived through the imagination. They pressed the button. The voice that came out was not Robert's, but his name has appeared in the middle of sentences are cut off. And in the conversations that seem to be treating the people as targets, such as pieces. And I realized at the time that this was a joint investigation. It was a movement. A type of organization that you don't need to explain to you. Why don't they care to be understood? She just moves on. And when it moves, it leaves a little trail and no room for any the wiser. My father got into things, like someone who's trying to save someone with your words. He said that there were connections to out-of-town meetings, which never appear in the report, the names of which will change as those change of clothes. He said that Robert was a point in a network of old, dirty, quiet, and what is most frightening is that it was the law when it suited him, and that was when the spoiled. I felt an impact that was in addition to the fear of it was the feeling of remembering something that I had never experienced. How to find out if my mind was just turning back to the moments with Robert and all of a sudden looking back to the what I call love, the way that he always knew too much, as it appeared to be too fast. As for the quiet, for him, at times, seemed to be computed. On the way, he asked, "Where were you?" as if he already knew the answer, and I just wanted to confirm it. I found myself remembering the small details. It's the kind of detail that we call to be careful when you're in love and, on that evening, the details became something else, monitoring, control, a roadmap to recognize that I had never noticed that he was following her. I wondered why my father never told me anything like that before. He was silent for a moment, and when he did, a voice came, heavy, almost too tired to upload it so much. He said that he tried to keep me out of it. He said that he believed that if he stayed quiet for a while, if it became more than just a man, growing old in a small town, they would be likely to lose interest. Just that people like you do not lose interest in it. The only change of pace, wait. Notes, and when he appeared in my life, and my father understood that it was not a coincidence, it was the approach has been planned. And when the system is close to, he is not going to get to know. He will come and use it. My dad knocked on the folder and it said that I needed to accept the truth and hide it I really didn't want to face. I was in the middle of it, by the way. I was on a path to him. I was on a bridge. And when he said it, the word bait came as a bitter pill because right now it wasn't just Robert. Telling him it was for my father, confirmed by the other side. I felt the anger rising again, but along with it came a grief of weird. As if it's a part of me was dying then and there. The part of you that believed that love is always in the shelter. He said that he was not running from the law. I was running away from something. It erases us. Something that does not accord with the one who knows too much. Something that, when you decide that you have turned into a problem, no hassles, no trades, no hold. And the worst part was the realization that my father didn't speak to me. Freak you out. Talk about it because I was trying to wake me up. The mindset from it was a matter of survival, and at that moment, I realized that I was going to need it with this mentality. Even though it's on me to become a version of myself that I didn't know. I looked back to the dark house, to the table, the us, and I thought at the time is running out, with the dawn coming up. On the road, waiting in the wings. And I could no longer pretend that you couldn't choose to miss out on anything. Any decision would have no impact. And there was the impact of a beautiful life-changing. It was the impact of the truth, the kind that breaks down the things on the inside and forces you to rebuild it on the wrists. My father closed the folder and it said Robert was not going to stop for a chat with a serious expression. He was pushing. It was because they already had permission to go above and beyond. And when he said it, I felt it in the air to weigh up. Because I know that the going beyond, it meant that in a world where the scenes have more of that in the rules. I stood there, staring into the darkness, trying to decide whether I would run or if I am faced with. And I realized that my life had turned into one of those stories that you will only understand in the beginning when he is inside of your order. And let me tell you one thing straightforward as well as talk free. Even if you've made it this far, and she felt that grip me, it is not curious for nothing. This is because it has a history that draws in the us by the collar and doesn't drop anymore. So if you sign up for the channel, and now, in truth, not as a one-click automatic, but as if to say, I'm going to the end because from here, and the revelations become more and more serious, and the decisions to become more and more dangerous. And I'm going to need you to be with me when the door to what I'm about to open it to show you who is Robert you really are. All I had the ideas started to come down at once, without any warning. As if someone had pulled out the structure of the wrong, and the rest of it had come together. The man that I loved already. I couldn't help more on the image of the hero that I built with care one piece at a time, from time to time. And the man who raised me is also not a good fit in the role of a villain in plain, that it would be easier to just accept it. It was the most painful, no one there. It was completely clean. No one was completely dark. I was in the middle, trying to breathe in between the releases of broken to the fact. The weather didn't expect my confusion. He moved forward, as always in advance, when we most need him to slow down. The bags were ready to go, standing by the door, silent, reminding us that the flight was not only a way off at the moment. The road was there outside in the open, providing a path that promised to be a distance, but are not promised to be at peace. I looked at those bags and I would feel the weight of a stranger, as if a load is not the clothing, but the decisions of which I have not yet had the courage to own up to. My heart was logical. On the head, trying to organize everything into categories. Simple right, wrong to stay, to go away. But it fit the way it did. Because it has no truth, came to be clean. You all arrived, stained with fear, and the omission of the things left unsaid. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe there was no choice but to charge a price that is too high. For the processing I was feeling inside of me, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't awe-inspiring. It was a transformation, forced, under pressure, and the ones that will change the mindset without asking for permission. I've got a review of my own personal journey to that city, and trying to keep track of what time I have left to ask the questions. At that point, I've accepted the answers already, just because they came from someone else that I loved. It's scary to see how you can learn to ignore the signs when they pose a threat to the comfort that we have built. And now, without this comfort, it all seemed to be raw too. The revelation did not come to relieve it. They came to be destabilized. I was thinking of the blood that I just couldn't see it, but I knew that it was there. Not as explicit, but also as a consequence. The stories that we end up all of a sudden. The people who take part. The truths laid out to maintain a semblance of order. And you understand it, everything changes. Because this is no longer just a person living your own life. And it turns out to be someone who need to make ends meet, the decisions of others. My dad is moving through the house with the precision of someone who had accepted the risk. He didn't talk much, but each and every gesture to it he said urgently. I, on the other hand, was still stuck in that space between act and feel, between the running and coming your way. To accept that your loved one can fool you and take you to the protection, you can also hurt yourself. It was as if I was in front of the double doors, knowing that any one of them to close something forever. The most difficult thing was to accept that there was no more time to think about this choice. There was no time for reflection, long for the conversation that is honest. To the rebuilding is slow. His life was not to provide this luxury. She was demanding an answer. And this has an impact on silent, because it requires us to act before it was recognized in his own decision-making. I was right there, standing, listening to the distant sound of the night, trying to figure out who I want to be, to go through what lay ahead, not who I wanted to be, but who I had become. Because at this point, run away or get now, it was not only a verb. They were the paths that Muldarium everything that would come after it, even if I haven't managed to see up to where they were going. And if you've read this far and feeling this sadness with me, write in the comments a simple phrase. But it's true, no option is without a scar. I was still in that sentence hammering on his head. None of the option is no. The scar, when the sound of footsteps on the outside and cut through the silence of the house, such as a razor blade. It was not the knock on the door. It was a presence. A shadow crossing over to the balcony, with a weight of up in the air, as if the night had been very real all at once. My father stopped in the middle of the hallway, a house, and I got it before I even see it. Someone had found us. The knob turned slowly and the door opened with a quiet that does not fit in with this. Robert came in without asking, years. And it wasn't the gun that startled me. The first one was the one to look at. He was out of his mind, but not in the way of a man is in despair. It was like someone finally pulled off the brake pedal. The face is hard, his breathing short. It is the attitude of those who have already decided that there is no negotiation. He did not even look at the house, did not even look in the bags, as if they already know it all. He looked straight at me, as if I was on the point of the end of the night. My heart raced, but I couldn't get myself to move. The feeling was of being trapped in your own body, trying to keep up with the speed of what was going on. Robert spoke my name once, and only once, and it had no warmth in that voice. It was a command. The same tone that I've heard close to the road, just now, with no mask, no. He told me that I had one last chance to do that. The last one, no chance. And every word seemed to be a step down into a darker place. Evidence of what side you're on, Sophia, he said it as if I were a witness in court. It's not like I have an obligation to choose. Right there in front of him in the face. I felt the heat rise in his face, a mixture of anger and humiliation. And because of that event, it was not about loyalty. It was about obedience. It was on him to test if it could lead me. My father didn't say anything about it. Don't argue, has not pleaded. He stayed silent, still, as anyone who has seen this kind of scene to happen to you before. And you know that any wrong word could be the last time. And when I looked up at him and I saw this thing, I rent it for the inside. And he wasn't angry with him, he was. Saying goodbye. A look at the hole and full of things I didn't say it aloud because, as he says, it becomes a reality. I saw it right there on the weight of one whole day. Out of the choices earlier than he might have done to keep me alive. And now he was giving me the hardest part, deciding what it is I shouldn't have to choose. Robert took a step inside, and by the way I don't think that he's not alone. Even though I don't see anyone else, I feel it. The house seemed too small for such control. Behind the scenes of the new one. The truth is hidden in that scene. It was not improvised. It was the result of the various parts of moving in the background, and I was the missing piece to fit in. He pointed the gun at the bottom, but close enough to remind you that it existed, and he said that my father had died. That escape was futile. He couldn't end it there for a time, and then save me, which was to come later. The word save has given me sick, because I had realized that, in his mind, to save the always meant to control them. I felt the impact of the perception of the force. Is the Robert that I loved may not have been the way that I did. Maybe it was just a version that is designed for me to hold you close, while the real decisions were taking place far away from my eyes. My father finally moved one step at a premium, as anyone who tries to put himself between you and us. Robert responded quickly. The gun and went up a little, and the tension grew in the crack visible. And I've held your breath, because I knew that any movement to be able to use something that is irreversible. That was when he told me that I had to go there, at that very moment. I was able to get through the day safely and leave it to my father to answer for what he has done. Or I would be on my father's side and turn lover to turn around the target, turn on the issue. The target words went through my head like a ton of bricks because it's connected to everything in the folder. The recorder, the pictures with the word for the bait. I was the one being protected. I was the one being used by both sides, each in their own way. And that's not me I was weak. Making the situation even more severe, because I knew for a fact that I didn't want to see it. I had no way to save them both. My father looked me up and down again, and in that look, I had a request without a word. It was not, I choose to. He was alive, that's it. Live even if I have to pay. And I destroyed them from the inside to be loved. That's the way it's almost too much. Robert, on the other hand, it looked to me like someone who is waiting for a confirmation. Yes, in a gesture of support. One by step, he didn't want to love at the moment. He wanted me to put it on the side of it, to validate what he did. I felt my hands galarum. In my head, I wanted to run, to scream, to break something, but my body remained still as if waiting for an order. And I hated myself for it. But I understand how fear can be paralyzing, as it can turn us into someone who just reacts. I needed to regain my control, even if just for a second. Not that that was a word for it. Because if I don't got, I would have been taken behind the scenes in this story without even realizing it. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out the first time around. His throat was dry. He was feeling horrible, because I realized I was in front of the two losses were inevitable. If I were to choose Robert, and I lost my father, and you may lose me with you, accepting the mindset of it, accepting the logic of the cruel and control. If I were to choose my father, I would be signing an order to the two of us, because Robert did not look like a man who is willing to back down. There was the right way, only less painful, or the most ruthless. And it was precisely at that moment, with his eyes fixed on my own, with my father in silence, waiting for what I would, that I realized that my desire to want to be more than that to pick a side. She needed to break up the play. Because I only chose it, I would have accepted the rules for them. And I didn't have the space to accept the rules of what I had become. In the piece, I took a step forward before that, and the fear of me in bearing him to the back. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but it's all in me was screaming for me not to stop. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought was that Robert couldn't hear it. My hands were shaking, mind asking for the time, and for anything that I delayed this moment in time. I said to him, just from the name, and I saw relief cross his face as a reward. It was not love, he was sure of. It was a confirmation of that, in the computation of him, and I was still in control. He relaxed his shoulders for a second, as he believes that he won an arm wrestling in the invisible. He gave a half step toward me, the gun lowering slightly, and the voice at the ready, something that would sound like a promise. It was then that I understood that it is the last part of the truth to hide. If I were to follow over a half an inch in that direction, I wouldn't be choosing to love or survival. I would be validating all of what he had done to me. And so, in some strange way, it gave me clarity. Prior to that, he was moving closer to the most, and I turned away from the body slightly, as if he were to obey you, and I have gotten on the radio stuck in the car. The gesture was so natural, no one reacted in time. My dad has moved instinctively forward, startled, and Robert raised his brow in confusion for half a second. Half a second is all what someone needs when they know exactly what they mean. I took the radio to his mouth and spoke the last sentence. It was not a long one. It was not dramatic. It was a direct, dry, and trained for the work. One of those phrases that seem to be common to those who don't know your code. But that will open the door of the wrong to the right place. My father had taught me that, years before, as if it were a story in one a day. It all goes wrong, and you know it. I remember it so clearly. And then, as I was saying, I felt something other than fear to take care of me. It was a transformation, a change of mindset is what happens when you realize that you're not overreacting, acting. The effect was immediate, as in the movie. There were no sirens or tell you about it. There was a silence. There was a silence, heavy, however, and it fell upon the house. As it is a coarse cloth, Robert froze. It was not anger that appeared on his face. It was a state of panic. In a panic, limited. A professional, one of those who only appears in the one who understands exactly of the size of the error that you have just done. He took a step back without realizing it. She squeezed his jaw, his eyes moving way too fast, as if it calculated some routes that will not be seen. The hand that was holding the gun, and he stiffened, not to shoot it, but to decide whether to run away. It was still an option. And I knew, in that moment, that sentence was going. The protocol was to call for help of the ordinary. It was to trigger something in you, Robert. I knew. And I was afraid. Anything that does not comply with it. Something is up, out of reach, out of control. My father looked at me as if he was seeing someone else. Not a surprise recognition, as someone who realizes that the lesson of the old seemingly useless. But I had found my purpose. I felt the impact of the exchange of looks like a thread pulling me out of the place where I was being held. For the first time that evening, and I was the bait. It was not a coin. It was not the choice of others. I had broken down the itinerary. Robert tried to speak, but her voice failed at the very beginning. He said my name again, only this time without his authority. There was an urgency there. He tried to get closer, then stepped back, as if any movement would make the situation worse. The mask that he had split for good. I was no longer with the sheriff's confidant, the man who claimed to love you. Someone is trapped by her own wings. I then realized that the game had turned in a way that is dangerous. Because when you take control of a person, you don't know which version will show up to retreat or attack. And it is this uncertainty that weigh you down. Hard on the body, the breath on the way to get on their feet. I am constantly on the radio in his hand and for a longer time than he needed to. As a warning, mute, that I would come back. He asked me what I had done. I didn't answer. Some of the answers, they give too much power to those who ask. I was there when he saw the long stretch when you hear a distant sound, which did not come to the house, but it seemed to be approaching the city as a whole. My father moved out on my own, without me touching it, as if to realize that it wasn't a moment too weak for details. And it was during that period, in that drop down between the result and the congregation, that I came to understand the real size of the decision I had made. I hadn't chosen a side. I had just changed the rules, and it never comes without a cost. The face of Robert, he stiffened again. Don't panic right now. But is it more dangerous to accept? As if he had realized that the night does not end there, and that the next move will not depend on only him. The house seemed too small for what I was about to take place. The air was dense, full of possibilities, and wrong. And while I could feel the weight of what I was triggered to fall on me, and sure, he established himself on the inside from the second, and nothing more, would be treated the same as before, not the truth. Not for the lies, and the people that I had to get to know. The world news began as a whisper of a distant, and in a few seconds, it turned into a warning which is impossible to ignore. They were not close enough to bring relief, not far enough to appear on the show. They cut down for the night, as if to tell you something that I had been fired long before me. My father, he did not wait for confirmation on any of them. He looked at me one last time, and that's the way a mixture of pride and goodbye, and went out into the darkness without saying a word. It was not fear. It was survival. It was a continuation of the journey he had been putting off for years. I've got to stop. Not because I wanted to run after him, but because something inside of me and I needed to face that he was still there, Robert, the human that I loved him. Or he thought he loved her. He stood motionless, her eyes fastened on me, and trying to decipher what had been a temporary error or the beginning of something that is irreversible. The panic had been replaced by a steely, dangerous, in that it appears when one considers that it has lost control of the game, but still has pieces left on the board. The sound of the sirens seemed to change the whole atmosphere of the house. The air became heavy, laden with the impact and consequences of which have not yet had a name. Robert took a step slow and calculated, as if he was walking on the ground very unstable. It is not pointed out over the gun, but it was still there and the present, reminding us that violence never comes out completely from the scene when the decisions of two big enter the game. I felt a strange pain in the chest, not the fear, but of mourning. Mourning the loss of all of that. I thought it was real, the version that I have made. The version of me that I believe that love is, in itself, was a sufficient protection. It's heartbreaking to realize that some of the relationships that are built on top of the truths that were incomplete, and that the truth is hidden, it does not destroy only the trust. It rewrites the entire memory. Robert tried to speak, but I raised my hand before. Don't like the order, but to a limit. For the first time since he walked in the house, I wasn't going to respond to what he was doing. I was picking out the silence, and it had more effect than any of the poor. He's got it. In some ways, he understood that he was no longer a place where he was dictating the pace. The sirens were closer. The voices started to come from far away. The moves that I couldn't see it, but you feel it. Behind the scenes getting in on the action. I then realized that the night was not the end. It was a tear. In a time of transformation. Brutal, those that will change the mindset of a person always. The girl that believed in the little stories she had been left behind, along with the bags next to the door, and the house which I may never see the same way again. I don't know who would come out alive that night. My father, running into the darkness, carrying the secrets, and the risks that I was only beginning to understand. Robert's right there in front of me. It was a little dangerous for someone who had already lost, but he had not yet accepted defeat. I was in the middle, feeling the weight of having broken up with a game that does not allow the players to be independent. Nothing in it seemed to be resolved, on the contrary. It was just starting to move out of the truth. All connections to the revelation and the consequences of that protocol is activated. Went far beyond the home in this city and of their relationship. I could feel it in the way, such as Robert watched him on the street. In a way, the silence between us was filled with too many things left unsaid. I took a step back, keeping a distance, knowing that, whatever the approach, now could be interpreted as a weakness. My heart was pounding fast, but there was something new there, clearly. Not about what to do next, but who I wouldn't be able to be. I would go back for their wedding. Would you accept half-truths? He would not return to play. And as for the horns, keeping watch over the night, and the fate of my father disappeared into the darkness. And I understood that the story was not finished and she was only changed in form. The one that comes after it entails consequences that no one was there ready to meet us, including me. If you've come this far, it's because that's the story you went through to some extent. It's not just about the escape or to choose sides. It's about making that change who we are when it all sets in. If this is the kind of the narrative and gives you something real and something that makes you think and feel, and at the same time, it makes no sense to subscribe to the channel. So you're still with me. The stories that they don't treat the viewer as an alternative, but also as someone that goes along with it. If you like it, leave a comment telling us what you do in my shoes at the same time. No need to explain too much. Sometimes, a phrase that says it all, and I'd like to read the answers, because they, too, are a part of the story. And if you ever feel such a connection to it until the end, leave your like, as it's a signal for quiet, which is worth it to be here with me. It helps more than it may seem. Tomorrow, at this same time, has a new video available for you to watch. It is a direct continuation of that story. Now, here's a video popping up on the screen. You click and it comes to me, because what happens after that, everything changes. Now there's a video right here on the side, which complements this subject. You can click and keeps me there as well.